Hey y'all, so I'm in my office, obviously. I'm trying to get this done in a quiet place. We're going to talk about shock. I'm going to break it down so that way if you want to go back, you can do each one individually. So we know that shock is a medical emergency. We have got to load and go. This is not a stay and play. If you suspect shock at all, automatically ALS should be there. But you want to get that patient going because this is very time sensitive. So basically we know that if someone's in shock, they've got circulatory compromise, they've got O2 deprivation, buildup of waste products, and organ failure. I'm using notes in my wonderful diagram that you'll see in one of these videos, but okay, so we'll talk about hypovolemic shock first. So hypovolemic, break down the word, hypo, low, volemic, volume. So we know that the heart is a container and a pump. With hypovolemic shock, we know that it's a container problem, not a pump problem. There's not enough blood to perfuse adequately or to carry oxygen because the blood carries oxygen. So this is my wonderful diagram. So remember that you're looking at the patient when I do this. So blood comes out from the left side and then, but blood comes out from the left side and then there's an exchange from oxygen to CO2. And then it keeps going, perfuses all of the organs, the capillaries, perfuses everything, and then comes up back into the heart and then goes to the lungs. So with hypovolemia, my wonderful, it might be backwards for you guys, but this is a horrible picture of a vessel. Vessel being veins or arteries, anything carrying blood, even capillaries. But so normally, you know, it's about like this, but if you have low volume, it's going to have a decreased size, because think of it like a water hose. If you have the water going full blast, it's just flowing out and it's at its normal thing. But if it's a low rate, then it's just trickling out, takes a long time to get where it needs to. So therefore it doesn't get enough oxygen, it doesn't get enough gas exchange, the body can become acidotic, which we'll learn a little as we go about the acidosis. I know you guys have learned some, but basically that's the buildup of lactic acid and your body can't get rid of it. I'll talk more about that with sepsis. But so when the vasoconstriction kicks in, your blood pressure is going to be low. Think about the hose, that small thing, not a lot of pressure coming out. And then your sympathetic nervous system kicks in, and that's due to the low perfusion. And so your sympathetic nervous system says, we need to beat the heart faster so that way it pumps to the organs like it needs to do. But really it's trying to maintain itself. Remember I said about the honey badger, the heart and the brain. And the heart will take it from the brain in a heartbeat. But those two do whatever it takes to keep perfusion going. So, like I said, blood's pumped out from the left side of the heart, through the arteries and veins, and then to the cells, tissues, and organs. It then drops off the oxygen, picks up the CO2, and carries it to the right side of the heart, into the lungs, and then the left side of the heart, and it starts all over again. So what causes hypovolemic shock? There are two main things that cause hypovolemic shock, and that's blood loss and fluid loss. So of course blood loss would be trauma. That's what everybody automatically thinks. Sorry, I got hair in my eyes, but everybody automatically thinks blood loss, which is great to think. If you've got an open femur fracture, if you've got a pelvic fracture, something to think about is if you have a pelvic fracture, you can't see it, but that patient can lose up to 1,500 cc's of blood, which is a lot. So be very careful with the hip fracture and like a compound fracture that is not through the skin, it's not penetrating, because they could still be losing a lot of blood in there. So something also to think about is if they have a GI bleed, if their stomach is bleeding on the inside, they're going to lose a lot of blood, or an aortic aneurysm that burst. So instead of the blood flowing around, that aneurysm expands in one spot. We'll talk about aneurysms later, but think of the vessel like this, and when you get an aneurysm, it one spot kind of comes out and expands. Then it gets weaker, of course, and something as little as coughing too hard or something could make that burst, and then they've got blood flow everywhere, and they really need fluid resuscitation. So besides the blood loss, something to think about is fluid loss. Lots of vomiting, lots of diarrhea. People with burns they need a lot of fluid, and they can go into hypovolemic shock easier, because if you think about it, like when you get a burn, if you get like a small burn, you'll see a blister come up and there's fluid in that. Well, if you get more than 1/4 of your body burned, that is so much fluid. It pulls that fluid out, so you're losing fluid. So the Parkland burn formula is essential. You need fluid resuscitation. And also excessive sweating. You'll see people who, construction workers, they can go into hypovolemic shock because if they're just sweating a lot, they're losing all of that fluid, and they're also losing the salt. So basically, so what do we do for hypovolemic shock? What can you guys do is, obviously, if they're having external bleeding, you want to stop the bleeding, and you do that by direct pressure. We use this a direct pressure, elevate, pressure point. But now, if it's a lot of blood loss, you do direct pressure, and then you put a tourniquet on that bad boy. You stop the bleeding somehow. So how will they present? So you're going to find low blood pressure, increased heart rate, if you catch it enough. If you've got low blood pressure and decreased heart rate, that means they're not compensated and they need help like 2 hours ago. And then their skin is cool and clammy, and that's because, like we talked about in the last time I saw y'all, was that all that blood is shunting towards the heart, and it's not working enough. There's not enough fluid to pump to the extremities, and so they'll be cool, clammy, or diaphoretic and pale because they're not perfusing right. So what do? You make sure that you've called ALS, and ALS is going to do lots of fluid resuscitation. They probably need vasopressors too if they've got cardiogenic problems, but we're not going to go into all that. And of course, they're going to need, if it's vomiting and stuff, you want to give them something for that. You guys can't, but the advanced, I think, can. So I'm going to use these videos for both. So for the advanced, they definitely need an antiemetic. They need fluid resuscitation, and they could possibly need a vasopressor like dopamine. I think that's all that I'm going to say about, oh, I'm sorry. Let's talk about stages real quick. Now, I should do this on every video, and I'm going to. So there's 3 stages of shock. There is, number 1 is compensated, and that's where they're doing okay, but they're not going to stay like that. So their blood pressure might be adequate. It might be like 100 over 58. That's low, but it's not like deathly low, you know? So, and their heart rate could be good, but they look like crap, they feel like crud, sorry. So they're compensated. Stage 2 is decompensated. That is when their heart rate gets either high or low, depending on how bad that they are. They'll have altered mental status, poor perfusion, they won't be breathing adequately. You'll know if they're decompensated because they're going downhill. And then the third type is irreversible, which we never want to get to, but that's when they're having organ failure, respiratory failure, cardiac failure, and that's when there's no getting them back. Hopefully we don't have to deal with that, but if you get on scene and you see that somebody died and it could be from that, it was because they were in irreversible hypovolemic shock. So that's it for that one. Thanks for putting up with me and me saying a lot. I'm trying to work on that, but you guys are doing great. I am excited that I get to talk to you guys all the time, and keep up the good work. There's going to be the rest of the shocks are coming, and you'll see them. Thank you.